All right, we're gonna move, guys, we're gonna move. Okay, I have to step away. Why don't you keep rolling? Right now we're seeing the interceptors, they're far away, over on the skyline, and going after what appears to be a missile.
This is the location where fragments from a missile that we saw last night, this is where it landed, causing damage to this building here.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Friday evening to you. I'm Maritza Giorgio here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From the release of new interview records of a woman making an accusation against President Donald Trump to day 7 of the U.S. and Israel's war with Iran. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top headlines of the day. The Washington Post reporting that Russia is now providing Iran with targeting information to attack American forces in the Middle East. That's according to 3 U.S. officials. This is the first indication that another major U.S. adversary is participating in this war, even indirectly. According to the report, Russia has passed Iran the locations of U.S. military assets, including warships and aircraft. Since that fighting began on Saturday, 6 U.S. troops were killed, several others injured by an Iranian drone attack Sunday in Kuwait. Now, Iran has fired thousands of attack drones and hundreds of missiles at U.S. military positions, embassies, and civilians. And we will continue to follow these developments and bring you any updates as they happen. Meanwhile, U.S. and Israeli forces pounded Iran's capital with intense airstrikes as the war in the Middle East escalates dramatically there. Witnesses say the strikes on Tehran are shaking homes across the city. You can see there just piles of rubble. Israel says it's destroyed most of Iran's air defenses and missile launchers. The U.S. struck and set fire to an Iranian drone carrier at sea. Iran fired back with missile and drone attacks on Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warns that the fighting is about to surge dramatically. This war has now killed more than 1,300 people that we know of. President Trump dismissing concerns about this war and making bold predictions about regime change. In a new interview, Trump says the U.S. will help choose Iran's next leader after the war ends. He also predicted the Cuban government will fall, saying, quote, Cuba's going to fall too. Trump confirmed the U.S. is talking to Cuba's communist leadership as that island nation faces instability. He brushed off worries about rising gas prices from the Iran conflict, claiming, quote, people are loving what's happening. The Israel Defense Forces are now confirming that Iran escalated its assault on Israel last night, and that is where we find our Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini. He joins us now live from Tel Aviv, Israel right now. Jason, Iran escalating their assault. So what can you tell us? I know you're on the move a little bit. Okay. What can you tell us about what caliber of missiles they are aiming where you are in Tel Aviv?
Hi there, Maritza. Thanks for bearing with me. You're right, we're on the move. We just arrived in Gigatayim, and this is the location where fragments from a missile that we saw last night, this is where it landed, causing damage to this building here. Just trying to get eyes on it right now. But I think first what we should do is show you what I saw last night. We were live on the air. I was on with our colleague Del Waters when the missile was exploding in the air. It looked like fireworks. So take a look at this.
We see the interceptors right now. We're okay right here. I'll go undercover if needs be. Right now we're seeing the interceptors. They're far away, over on the skyline, and going after what appears to be a missile.
Oh my God.
Holy That gives you a sense of just how quick things happen. You heard the siren there, and then interceptors went up within just seconds, Del. That's how it works.
Okay, so I'm seeing tape now around this area where this building, and I'm going to actually walk right in front of it over here, if you can just stay with me. And okay, now we're seeing some of the damage to it. Now we're understanding that there was no one injured, thankfully, because people took shelter. Now this was a fragment munition, so a cluster munition, and this is a type of munition that when it explodes in the sky, it goes all over the place. And so this is just one of the spots where it did cause some damage. And Iran is saying that this is one of the larger missiles that they have, and it's one of the capabilities they continue to have.
All right, Scripps News senior international correspondent Jason Bellini. I know that you were in some tense situations last night. So glad you are safe. Stay safe. Reporting for us live in Tel Aviv. Thank you. And Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins us now live from our D.C. newsroom to add some more context here about what we're hearing on the ground in our nation's capital. So, Stephanie, we have heard from U.S. officials that there's no let up in sight here as far as the offensive. Now the president says he wants to have a say in selecting Iran's next leader. We've heard mixed messaging from this administration about exactly the objective here and the goals, whether it's regime change or nation building. We've been told it's not nation building. So let's unpack some of that and what the president is saying he wants.
Well, as you mentioned what the president was saying, I was just going to double check and pull up on my computer a Truth Social post that he made earlier today to make sure I got my wording correctly. But the president does say there will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender. So those are strong words, and unconditional surrender in all caps, as the president often uses in his social media posts. So beyond just saying that he wants to be involved in picking the next Iranian leader, presumably that would only happen after this unconditional surrender that the president is now calling for. Iran seemingly moving forward on its own right now, going through its own process for selecting a new leader. So if, in the immediate days and weeks, it's hard to see how President Trump would be involved with any decision that Iran would be making in terms of who the next leader of that country should be. Iran has said that there are no negotiations, there are no diplomatic talks happening between the U.S. and Iran right now. So certainly we'll be keeping our eyes on that situation and Iran moving through its own process. But as you noted, the attacks expected to escalate. Another big question we have here is, what does that escalation look like? There have been a lot of concerns that U.S. troops might end up being boots on the ground in Iran, which would certainly be an escalation. And we're not sure if that might happen or if that is on the agenda for the next few weeks. That the White House and the Trump administration has made clear they expect this conflict to go on for a little while now. But we are not really sure what exactly this escalation might look like. It's largely been a campaign from the air right now, but the conflict is widening. There are more countries getting involved, and there are more countries having to go through special efforts to try to get their own citizens out of harm's way in that Middle East region. Of course, that includes the U.S. State Department and Americans that are caught over there, some of whom might have just been stuck in a Middle Eastern country on a layover for their flight, that they were heading somewhere else, but then the airspace was closed and they got stuck. So I know congressional offices are being flooded with calls from Americans who are trying to get help getting back home. We know the State Department has at least started at least one evacuation flight. I think there were 300 on that plane getting them out of the region. So hopefully those types of flights and efforts continue to try to get as many Americans out of harm's way as we can.
Yeah, I mean, those are the big questions that I'm hearing too, Steph. How do we get Americans home? What is the timeline here? How long will this go on? Will we see boots on the ground? And also, our involvement in what comes next for Iran. These are all things that people are asking. So, Steph, let's switch gears because we need to talk about what happened. Big late news yesterday that happened here in the U.S. President Trump replacing DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. So let's walk through what that looks like moving forward, especially as we are continuing to be in a DHS shutdown.
So Kristi Noem really had a rough week on Capitol Hill, testifying before committees on the House side and on the Senate side, and really getting hammered on what her leadership of DHS has been. Her choice to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an ad campaign, how she has led ICE and immigration enforcement across the country. And of course, that includes the killing of 2 Americans in Minnesota. So she was facing a lot of criticism, and her testimony didn't exactly go well in front of either committee. So rumors were swirling around D.C. about her getting removed from her position, and then the president made that official yesterday, though according to his social media post that that's not effective until the end of this month, but that he has tapped Senator Markwayne Mullin from Oklahoma, a Republican, to be the next leader of DHS. Now, Mullin described himself as a good ally of the president yesterday and clearly indicated that those talks had been ongoing for a little while between his team and between the White House team. But he told the press yesterday he wasn't exactly expecting the phone call yesterday. Seemed to have caught him a bit by surprise, even though those conversations were happening. But he is pledging to lead DHS for all Americans and to make sure that his priority is enforcing the policies and the laws on the books. Take a listen.
When I go into this position, yes, I'm a Republican, yes, I'm conservative. But Department of Homeland Security is to keep everybody, regardless if you support me, if you don't support me, regardless of what your thoughts are. I'm here to enforce the policies that Congress passed, and right now I'm part of it, but once I make that transition, my focus is to keep the homeland secure.
Mullin does need to go through the Senate confirmation process. Now, traditionally, with past precedent has shown that when there's a sitting senator nominated for a cabinet role, that confirmation process usually runs a little more smoothly as they are doing interviews and conversations with their colleagues. However, I expect Mullin to face some really tough questions in his confirmation hearing about how he's going to lead DHS. What is he going to do that's different from what Kristi Noem has done, especially when it comes to immigration enforcement, things like administrative warrants versus judicial warrants. Those are questions I think he's really going to be asked to kind of draw a line in the sand of what he would do leading DHS. So, nothing is confirmed. Nothing is a done deal in the Senate until the vote has actually happened. So those conversations are going to continue over the next few weeks. But Senate Democrats, multiple Senate Democrats confirming to Scripps News yesterday that just swapping out the leadership, just putting in Markwayne Mullin for Kristi Noem, that's not enough to make them agree to fund the Department of Homeland Security. They need to see more change. Listen to Senator Cory Booker.
It is not about the head of this agency. It is about what the agency is doing in our communities. And obviously there'll be hearings, and I think a lot of this should be brought out. But we have an agency that is out of control, and what they're doing in our communities, what they are doing to the Constitution, their reckless, continuous violation of court orders, even Republican-appointed judges, they are routinely violating those court orders. That makes this whole agency, to me, morally bankrupt.
When we talk about the DHS shutdown, we often highlight TSA as anyone who goes on a plane needs to go through a TSA checkpoint among those essential employees who are expected to go to work, even though they don't know when their next full paycheck is going to come. Those employees should have gotten a partial paycheck earlier this week, but their next pay date, that would be the first missed full paycheck if this shutdown continues. And it does not look like there's any hope in sight, at least in the next few days, of getting some kind of compromise between Democrats and Republicans on that issue.
All right, Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen live for us. Thanks so much, Steph. Coming up on Today As It Happened.
New documents in the Epstein files allege sexual assault of a minor decades ago by Donald Trump. I'm Alex Miller in New York. What the survivor said in her report and how the White House is responding.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top headlines.
The Justice Department has yet to release thousands, if not millions, of files related to its investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. But 3 documents are turning heads. They are the FBI 302's interviews with a survivor, a little girl who says she was assaulted by President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. If true, both Trump and Epstein would have been in their 40s. The FBI interviews have now been added to the database. Scripps News senior national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York with the latest. And although uncorroborated, Alex, the allegations are damning. What do we know about the allegation itself?
Well, they are damning, and I want to make sure that we say in the outset that they have not been corroborated yet. But these 3 documents are with the same survivor of Epstein. They were interviews that took place between August and October of 2019, so well into President Trump's first term. And while she was sitting for these interviews and discussing at length the abuse that she endured from Jeffrey Epstein, she also mentioned abuse that she allegedly endured by President Trump, obviously then a private citizen. She said between the ages of 13 and 15, she wasn't exactly sure when while she was being abused by Jeffrey Epstein, he brought her to either New York or New Jersey. And then in that instance, that is where she met Donald Trump. She says in her testimony that she felt off the bat that he did not like her. He called her a girl boy, essentially the equivalent of a tomboy, and said that she felt like he did not like her immediately. Now, I want to read you one piece of this allegation. It is incredibly disturbing to read. She said that Trump came into the room and he asked everyone to leave the room and said something to the effect of, "Let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be." Now, there was an entire paragraph, Del, that comes after what we just highlighted there, but we are choosing not to show that on television because it is incredibly graphic detail and it's allegations of forced sex with a minor. Again, these are not corroborated allegations, but they were made in multiple instances, and the same story was repeated by the same victim over and over again. Now, there was a third interview, that last interview that happened in October of 2019, where she kind of asks what's the point of sharing all of this because nothing's going to come of it because of the statute of limitations. She also said that she saw Trump 2 more times after that supposed incident, but she kind of changed the subject in the interview and asked to talk about it later. They never got back to it.
Alex, the survivor also gave a little insight into the dynamic between Epstein and Trump. What did she have to say?
It's interesting. She said that there was like a level of jealousy that she felt that Trump had for Epstein, at least at the beginning of what she had witnessed. But then she felt like it kind of evened out, but that they had an interesting dynamic at play there. Now, she also said that she overheard pieces of conversations that the two men were having. There's this one part where she said that they sometimes used terms, I want to read you this, that use the word fresh meat, untainted, and not jaded while they were referring to girls. She goes on to say that she didn't really understand what they meant when they were saying not jaded and that she later looked it up, but that these were terms that they used to describe younger girls. She said that she heard the two of them discussing blackmail and Trump talking about washing money through casinos.
Is the White House responding to this? And I'm curious, if so, what are they saying?
Well, President Trump has been very clear over the last few years when all of this has been discussed that he denies every allegation that is against him, and the White House is responding, basically, amplifying those statements. We got a statement from the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, in which she said as much. She said, "These are completely baseless accusations backed by zero credible evidence from a sadly disturbed woman who has extensive criminal history." She goes on to say that the fact that President Biden's Department of Justice had known about these allegations, presumably because they were part of this file, and did nothing with them, proves that they knew that President Trump, she goes on to say later in the statement, has been exonerated.
Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller for us live in New York. Alex, we thank you very much.
Up next on Today as It Happened.
It's good to be home.
You're watching Today as It Happened, Scripps News' rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right in.
Put the good Reverend, my father, to rest today, and will honor him by building upon his work and taking up the challenge. And so while he would be delighted to witness this gathering of friends and allies, and sorry to not be here to conduct it personally, he would be intent that we stay the course and carry on the struggle for justice.
Reverend Jackson was at once a mighty roaring river, able to create movements and galvanize masses with his words and his passion, and a gentle brook, able to provide guidance and comfort to the beleaguered and the bereaved.
Because of Jesse, the Democratic Party changed its rules, ending the winner-take-all distribution of delegates during presidential primaries, which meant underdogs and outsiders like Bill Clinton or Bernie Sanders could stay competitive and build momentum instead of getting knocked out early. And it was because of that path that he had laid, because of his courage, his audacity, that 2 decades later, a young black senator from Chicago's South Side would even be taken seriously as a candidate for the presidential nomination.
Jesse kept hope alive for us in his lifetime. And we've got to continue to do it in our lifetime for our children, because there's nothing beyond our capacity when we work together. Nothing, nothing, nothing. So stand up and finish his job.
He was faithful to the scripture which said, we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But unlike a lot of people in politics, he didn't go around looking down his nose at other people. He hated the sin and not the sinner. He was always trying to lift people up. So,
coming up on Today as It Happened, the war with Iran is causing an international energy crisis. Why it could ripple through the economy far beyond just the price of gas. We're so glad you're back with us on Today as It Happened. I'm Maritza Giorgio here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
I don't have to tell you, it has been a rough week with regards to all of the things on your 401k. And yes, that is the market that we're looking at right now. The Dow down 453 points. The good news is it was down even further than that when the day began. 800 points at the opening bell, 1,000 points just yesterday. Let's go right now to Scripps News. Mitch McCann, who is live in Wall Street for us. And Mitch, why are we seeing what we're seeing?
Yeah, hi from New York, Dale. Nice to be with you. Look, a range of factors, actually, but one of the big ones contributing to what you just talked about on Wall Street this week has been oil. Prices have spiked dramatically since the US-Israel-Iran conflict started last weekend. And the price of Brent crude a short time ago when I last looked was about $92.20 a barrel, which is an 8% increase today alone and a 26% increase over the week. West Texas Intermediate is trading at $90 a barrel, a 12% increase from yesterday. All to say that when oil prices are high, it affects many sectors of the overall economy that rely on oil, which is why investors are so concerned. One of the first things we think of when it comes to oil, understandably, is the cost of gasoline. I think this is important to talk about. Right now in the US, on average, it is 33 cents more expensive per gallon to buy than it was at this time last week. Another reason the broad market index has finished down today was sector-specific falls in sectors like aviation and banking, which we've already talked about this week. Aviation, it has to be said, is being hammered because of these flight cancellations. All major US airlines were down a short time ago when I looked, including American Airlines, which was down 5.1%. So overall, a number of factors. The Dow this week has fallen around 2.8%, the S&P 500 just over 1%, and the NASDAQ is still slightly in the green. But overall, though, as you say, a worrisome week, Dow, for those keeping a close eye on their 401k.
Yeah, we should keep in mind the president just last week celebrating the fact that the Dow was at 50,000, not there right now. Another issue that may have spooked investors, the unemployment numbers out today. What can you tell us about the jobs numbers?
Yeah, this is another concerning piece of data for officials in Washington. The Bureau of Labor came out today releasing the jobs report for February. And for context here, analysts expected the job creation would be around 50,000 jobs. And when it came out this morning, it was a bit of a shock because it was actually negative, as in they had lost 92,000 jobs. So a significant difference there. One of the sectors that we've been looking at is healthcare. Now, this usually shows strong hiring growth, but it was down in February, losing 28,000 jobs, largely because of strike action concerning Kaiser Permanente. But jobs also fell in the information sector and in the federal government. All to say, many factors like this report contributing to a pretty average day after an already pretty average week on the market for investors.
Scripps News correspondent Mitch McCann for us on Wall Street. Mitch, thank you very much. A growing energy crisis could affect other areas of the economy as well. Scripps News correspondent Maritza Giorgio reports on what's causing it and what could cost you more because of it.
The war with Iran sending shockwaves through global energy markets. It's already impacting the price you pay for gas, but consumers could feel the impact far beyond that. The growing conflict in the Middle East causing an international energy crisis with the potential to ripple through global economies.
If you have some kind of, conflict or geopolitical disturbance, right, in one part of the world, right, that is like throwing a rock in a pond, and the effects just ripple.
The problem right now is transporting oil out of the Middle East, according to the director of the International Energy Agency.
There is no shortage of oil globally. The issue is the dislocation.
That's largely because of a near standstill in the Strait of Hormuz, where about 20% of the world's oil supply passes through daily. Since the start of the war, Iran has attacked several ships in the strait and threatened tankers that try to pass through it, effectively closing it off. The U.S. only gets a fraction of its oil from the Middle East, but that doesn't mean Americans won't feel the impact of this.
This is a war that impacts the entire world, and the U.S. isn't completely immune for it.
That's because oil is priced on a global market. Americans are already seeing that at the pump, where the price of a gallon of gas is up more than 30 cents from a week ago, according to AAA. But it could also ripple through other areas dependent on natural gas and oil, says supply chain management professor Sekin Ozkul.
We're going to be seeing definitely some huge impacts, and fertilizers may impact food prices. The petrochemicals is going to be impacting eventually consumer goods and plastic packaging. So all of this have some ripple effect.
In an interview with the Financial Times, Qatar's energy minister warned the war could force Gulf energy exporters to shut down production completely. Currently, the price of a barrel of crude oil is up about 20% over the past week, topping $90 on Friday. It's the highest in 2 years. He said that could go up to $150 a barrel if this war continues. Experts say that won't just mean even higher gas prices, but also steeper utility bills. Maritza Giorgio, Scripps News Group, Washington.
It was likely the U.S. that caused that explosion that took down an Iranian school. That's what military experts are telling the Associated Press. 165 people were killed, most of them children. Experts examined satellite images and say the U.S. airstrike targeted a compound associated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard. That school was right next to the compound. The strike happened at the first day of the war. Iran blaming both the U.S. and Israel. Neither country so far has accepted responsibility. The Pentagon saying they are investigating. Former Michigan football coach Sharon Moore reaching a deal today, pleading no contest to 2 misdemeanors. Moore was facing a felony charge of home invasion, also 2 misdemeanor charges of stalking and breaking and entering. Moore was abruptly fired last year for having an inappropriate relationship with his executive assistant. He confronted the woman, blamed her for his firing, and threatened to kill himself. That is what led to those charges.
Up next on Today as It Happened.
But you see there, Del, 75% of those who identify as MAGA say they do support the U.S. involvement in Iran. So this idea that MAGA is somehow very much out of step with the president doesn't seem to be playing out.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Maritza Giorgio. Let's get right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
candidate Donald Trump running on getting America out of those so-called forever wars. Former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene now suggesting Tucker Carlson run for president in 2028. Comes as Trump claims that Carlson lost his way over his criticism of the U.S. operation in Iran. Here's exactly what she had to say on X. She says Trump doesn't even know what MAGA is anymore. Trump is not America first, he's donor first. Says Tucker would beat Trump if he ran for president, and Trump tried to violate the Constitution and tried to run again for a third term, end quote. Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty joins us live now. And is the former Congresswoman right?
Well, Del, for a lot of evidence pointing to the answer being not exactly. And she even said on that post, MAGA turned into MAGA, which I guess is make Iran great again. But we can take a look and just see how many people actually identify as MAGA and then kind of go from there. It's only about 25% of the overall population. This is a recent poll. They asked, do you consider yourself a MAGA supporter? And then when you get into the actual support for the invasion of Iran, this is a specific question about overthrowing the Iranian government with military force. You see there 32%. That's actually gone down a little bit from some other polls. They had it at about 40% in the immediate aftermath of those strikes, now nearly a week ago. But you see there, Del, 75% of those who identify as MAGA say they do support the U.S. involvement in Iran. So this idea that MAGA is somehow very much out of step with the president doesn't seem to be playing out. Now, it is worth noting, of course, what started this whole thing was some criticisms back and forth between the president and Tucker Carlson. So there are some pretty prominent voices in the so-called MAGA sphere, the Trump inner circle in terms of media influencers that have been outspoken in their criticisms of the actions of the United States in Iran. But so far it's been mostly sort of like podcaster types. These are not necessarily the voices that those who are voting for Donald Trump, those who are making their decisions about whether or not they support him, are necessarily listening to on a day-to-day basis. Could it grow and change? Certainly, but for now, it's simply not there yet.
Raph, as you know, we've been dipping in and out of the celebration of life for the Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr. All three living Democratic presidents speaking out today. I want to play a little bit of former President Barack Obama and get your take on it.
Everywhere we see greed and bigotry being celebrated and bullying and mockery masquerading as strength. We see science and expertise denigrated while ignorance and dishonesty and cruelty and corruption are reaping untold rewards every single day. We see that. And it's hard to hope, so it may be tempting to get discouraged, to give in to cynicism. It may be tempting for some to compromise with power and grab what you can, or even for good people to maybe just put your head down and wait for the storm to pass. But this man, Reverend Jesse Louis Jackson, inspires us to take a harder path.
I brought with me two momentums from Jesse Jackson's campaign that I have saved since I was a student. So one is this button that reads Jesse Jackson 88. The other, some of you who were around at the time may remember, is this button. I will read it to you, and pastors, please forgive me. It reads as follows, all caps. Damn straight, exclamation point. It's time for a black presidential candidate. That was a Jesse Jackson pin from those days.
Did we just see a preview of the Democratic midterm message?
Well, I think there's a lot of Democrats who saw that and thought, well, you know, maybe Trump running for a third term wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if it meant we could also get Obama in the race. I think there is some nostalgia there. And no doubt this idea, and you see that was sort of peak Obama, not directly mentioning Trump's name, but no doubt making a case against what we have seen out of this White House in the eyes of Democrats over the past year. Didn't talk about that viral video of Trump seemingly mistakenly, I guess, according to him, tweeted about the Obamas being apes. What he did was use some of those rhetorical skills that he was so known for in 2008 and 2012. But I think we are, Del, a long way away from seeing the former President Obama on the campaign trail. I expect that many of these candidates, especially those Senate candidates, in some of these contentious states, will want him out on the trail come the fall. And it's worth noting, Joe Biden also gave some pretty good remarks. I mean, in terms of the crispness of the message there, much more as we remember him during his better days, certainly not the type of Joe Biden that was appeared in that debate. And even polling shows that people now think that Joe Biden was a better president than Donald Trump. And so all of those individuals that took the stage today had a somewhat political message in remembering Jesse Jackson.
I had to laugh because somebody said that they wanted all three former presidents to speak for 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know of any of the three of them could even introduce themselves within 4 minutes, nor did it work. But let's talk about affordability, because the K-shaped economy, the wealth gap now the widest that we have seen in 30 years. How is that shaping up as the issue of the day?
Well, I mean, it's a huge problem. I think when you talk about how people are feeling about the economy, yes, the president's biggest strength has been really the stock market, how well that is done. And we've been reporting that it's not been particularly strong over the past few days. And it is really that bifurcated economy where it is people who are already doing pretty good are doing even better under President Trump. But when you are somebody who watches how much you're spending on groceries, when you're paying attention to how much milk costs, how much these everyday items cost, we know from the polls and those jobs numbers today, which were not nearly as strong as economists had predicted, that there is a have and have not that seems to only be widening under President Donald Trump.
They say Wall Street giveth and Wall Street taketh away. The president's saying Dow 50,000, I think if we look at those numbers again, we right now are at Dow 47,000 and some change. Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty, Raff, as they say in poker, read them and weep.
That's right.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
We've taken out nearly 30 of their ships. Their Navy has been deemed combat ineffective. 90% reduction in ballistic missile retaliatory strikes against the United States and our Gulf Arab and partners in the region.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened, Scripps News' debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
President Trump saying the U.S. will provide $20 billion in reinsurance to shippers in the Persian Gulf. Several private maritime insurers dropping coverage for shipping companies. That essentially ended the flow of oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow body of water off Iran's coast. The president saying there will be no deal with Iran to end the war. He says he will only accept a full and unconditional surrender. Overnight, the U.S. and Israel ramping up more and more airstrikes. Residents there say it was the worst night since the war began. So far, more than 1,200 Iranians, 10 Israelis, and 6 U.S. troops have been killed. Meanwhile, the remains of those 6 U.S. soldiers are expected to be flown into Dover Air Force Base in Delaware this weekend. Meanwhile, 7 days in, CENTCOM saying U.S. forces have struck more than 3,000 targets. That includes, as you heard Jason say, 43 Iranian ships either destroyed or damaged and countless ballistic missile sites.
I won't get ahead of the president on broadcasting any timelines. What I will tell you is what President Trump has already laid out, which is that the achievable objectives of Operation Epic Fury we expect to last about 4 to 6 weeks, and we are well on our way to achieving those objectives.
Scripps News senior White House correspondent Haley Bull is live now on the North Lawn. And Haley, the president talking tough when it comes to Iran's future.
Yeah, that is exactly right. While the White House is touting what they view as progress in this operation, the president is moving to take a stronger hand in dealing with Iran's future as he declares no deal with Iran, only what he calls unconditional surrender. The president stating in part on Truth Social today, quote, "After that and the selection of a great and acceptable leader, we and many of our wonderful and very brave allies and partners will work tirelessly to bring Iran back from the brink of destruction." Now, the president's suggestions of the U.S. having a stronger role in determining Iran's leader comes as we have seen the administration be careful in how they talk about regime change, not listing that as a specific objective, but not shying away from the topic either, as the president in public statements has encouraged the Iranian people to rise up. The White House today acknowledging that the president wants to take an interest in the next leader, pursuing the next leader. The White House press secretary saying that the president is discussing and deliberating it, adding that there are people that the government and intelligence community are looking at. Now, this comes after Iran's president suggested some countries have also started mediation efforts. When we talk about that word deal, though, senior officials earlier in the week indicated that interlocutors were not being used despite outreach from other nations, while Iran's foreign minister suggested in an interview with NBC News this week that Iran does not see a reason to engage in negotiations again. So certainly a lot of moving pieces, but we are seeing that shift in how the president is approaching Iran's future publicly.
And Haley, this is what's fascinating. We're learning more about Russia's role in all of this. What impact is that having?
Yeah, Del, we are learning that it is believed Russia is providing intelligence to Iran, according to an intelligence official. Now, this is significant as Iran, of course, has provided military support to Russia in its war against Ukraine, as we have seen that partnership develop the past several years. However, the White House is brushing aside concerns that this is having an impact on their objectives in this operation. The White House press secretary was pressed on this front. She said this.
It clearly is not making a difference with respect to the military operations in Iran, because we are completely decimating them. As I said earlier, we've taken out nearly 30 of their ships. Their Navy has been deemed combat ineffective. 90% reduction in ballistic missile retaliatory strikes against the United States and our Gulf Arab and partners in the region. So, of course, we are achieving the military objectives of this operation, and that is going to continue because the United States military is the best and most lethal fighting force in the world.
Notably, Del, this all comes, though, as the U.S. has sought to broker a deal between Russia and Ukraine. This is significant, as the press secretary also said that the president still believes peace is achievable on that front. Earlier today, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, in announcing a prisoner exchange, also added that discussions are ongoing, indicating he expects more progress still ahead. Meanwhile, underlying all of this, Del, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the United States requested support against those Iranian drones that the Ukrainians have been fighting against for years at this point. Zelensky saying earlier this week that he has instructed the presence of Ukrainian specialists as well. Additionally, today, the president convening defense contractors at the White House for a pre-scheduled meeting, but as the administration has focused on bolstering the U.S. defense industrial base, but publicly tried to portray confidence in their munitions and weapons levels to carry out what they are looking to do in regards to Iran, Del.
Scripps News senior White House correspondent Haley Beaufort live on the North Lawn. Haley, thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on Today As It Happened. I'm Maritza Giorgio. Have a great Friday night.